are spilling out and staggering in a square. There's lads and lasses falling about and a crackling in the air. Then around the dungeon doors, the shutters and the queues. Everybody's looking for somebody's arms to fall into. That's what it is. This is a suburb of Glasgow where I was brought up from the age of 0 to the age of about 6. This place here is, we used to call this the dump. It looks really polite now, but it was a lot rougher when I was a kid. And we used to play here like anything. There was a dirty, great big pylon right here. It was a lot of fun, and the neighbours were fabulous. They're all really nice people, and I had a lot of very happy times. When I was about 6 years old, I came to this one, because when we moved just a couple of miles down the road to Scotstoun School, my first day here was pretty terrified, and I was playing with my dinky toys. I had a little car that I took to school with me, and a wonderful car. It was a little Hudson sedan. I was playing with it in the dirt, and I remember standing up, and then this little tyke from, with a crew cut and a face like a bullet, and he grabbed me by the throat, and he posed the immortal question, "Celtic or Rangers?" And it's the first time that I've ever had to deal with that and make the right decision, which I think I must have done because I'm still here to tell the tale. A sort of a Scottish thing, just seems Scottish to me. I can't remember what key the song is now, but I think it's... Seems that wherever I've lived, it's always been a river. Went from the Clyde to the Tyne and then the Thames. Here in Glasgow, I used to lie in bed. I used to live just a couple of 100 yards away from here. And I used to lie in bed and listen to the foghorns of the boats on the river. And I actually remember always trying to imitate the sounds. I was trying to imitate the sounds of foghorns on my guitar with a level pedal and trying to push them in. A few years ago, I was working with some Irish heavyweight players in Dublin, and I think they were all sitting about and we were playing, and said, "Is my Celtic music Irish or Scottish?" And they said, "Oh, it's Scottish." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, no, it's Scottish." "No, you can tell by the intervals." Whatever the intervals were, that's how they could tell. Maybe that's an interval. And Edinburgh. I always try and get here when I come to Scotland, and it's always been a magic place for me. I always feel as though I always feel other lives here, almost as if you were here in other lives. There are ghosts all over the place, and not that I really believe in them particularly, but it's just there's so much history here. It seems to be schizophrenic in a way, because it's got this genteel image, a rather well-to-do thing about it, but it's also got a real roughness to it as well, and another side. And the music was all connected between Scotland and the borders and Newcastle anyway, because even when I went down to Newcastle, I remember hearing Jimmy Shand and his band records there that my Uncle Kingsley had in his collection. And the real turning point for me was Kingsley, my mum's brother, playing boogie-woogie piano, the 3 chords, the 12-bar boogie-woogie, and I just was absolutely spellbound. I thought it was actually about the best thing I'd ever heard in my... I did think it was the best thing that I'd ever heard in my life, and the sort of wonderful cosmic maths of it. It was just great, to me, a wonderful, beautiful logic to it. I wanted a guitar so badly that I used to smell the Fender catalogue. I know actually what it smells like,
and the grain of the paper and everything else on those old catalogues with all the instruments in. There was an advert actually for a Shadows recording a few years ago. I had this little boy looking in the window at the Strat. There was actually one at the bottom of Salters Road. There was a little music shop. Of course, I used to pass it going backwards and forwards from school. And it was just like that ad. I was just like this little kid with his nose pressed up against the window. You know, there's this schoolboy lust, absolutely, you know, the red Strat. It's what I wanted so desperately badly. And I ended up getting a sort of a German imitation, a very poor imitation, Hofner, which cost my dad £50, and then that was a lot of money. Big stretch for him, and I didn't have the nerve to ask him for an amplifier after that, so I just blew up the radio. And then I used to play I put the arm on a chair, the head on a chair like that, over the chair, and I used to put my head on it like that, to, you know, so I could make it seem to be a bit louder. And then, of course, I ended up borrowing friends' acoustic guitars, much cheaper than these things, and learned how to fingerpick and ended up folk joint. So I was doing both things at once. Well, here we are at river number 2 in my life, really, but I suppose the most important one was the River Tyne, my much beloved Tyne Bridge at the back. When I was a little boy, I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remember spitting off the top of there just to see how long it took to get to the bottom. Being here and on a quayside here, it encapsulates a lot of the dreams and aspirations that I had when I was a little guy, yeah, running around here. This is what everybody knows around here as the Spanish City. And I don't know who called it the Spanish City, and I don't know whose idea it was. But it was the first place where I heard rock and roll music played loud, really. And it was almost a physical shock to hear the music played that loud. And I realized it was music that was meant to be played loud. I wanted to be able to be one of the boys who worked on the waltzers and impressed the girls and all of that. It did get the song going, the Tunnel of Love song. I attempted to get the mood that it meant for me by putting the Skaters Waltz on the front, because that's what I remember, just playing on the sand and hearing that tune. I get a real thrill out of the fact that they tell me here that they open the Spanish City every day with my music, with Tunnel of Love, which is pretty amazing. Coming back after a long time away, a place like this seems smaller, and it seems emptier. Well, I come back to Northumberland whenever I possibly can. Once you've lived here, it never really leaves you. It's a many-sided part of the world. It's got an awful lot going for it in so many ways. Certainly with my boys, for instance, just with Northumberland, I had a will to get them up here from the south every now and again, to bring them here and show them the county a little bit here and there, just so that they would have some sort of relationship with it.
Here's one of the two of us in 1954. Don't laugh, I keep all of the pictures. Are you going to take a photograph?
My first job really on the Evening Post was to come down here and review the matinee of the show, which was going on here in the City Varieties. And because I wanted to get involved in writing about music and all the rest of it. So as a cub, you were sent here and you had to do one paragraph. I mean, I remember interviewing the cast for a pantomime and talking to the Ugly Sisters in there, and breaking my heart. And that must have been when I was about 19. And writing the lines, you know, the old boys in the band, and there's not the glamour now, you see what happened to society and all that. I got to know Steve I'd seen him at a blues club,
and playing a national steel guitar. And I wanted one of those guitars very badly, and I got to know Steve, and we started playing together. And Steve had a huge collection of blues records, and so where he lived in Newport Mountain, Headingley, became really like sort of a university of the blues for me. The national steel guitar was called the National Duolian that we played, and Steve found the name the Duolian String Pickers, which was quite a nice name. And we used to wear those Blind Willie McTell caps and things like that, those big old 20s caps and things, which is an alarming thought, really.
No, he came up just after the Brothers in Arms tour. I happened to be down in London, saw Mark, and he said, "I'll tell you what, really nice." He said, "I'd really like to go and do a couple of little gigs with you." And I said, "Well, if you're serious, come up next weekend." And you know, I thought, well, he won't come, and he did. You know, he obviously wanted to do it.
Occasionally slum it.
Yeah.
I think I did make a conscious choice to wind things down a little bit, because stuff just gets too damn big. When you have to take your own damn stage around the place, suddenly you realise that there are trucks needed just for that. But you end up with this great big stupid lighting rig, then you end up with a massive crew, which actually was always fun, having a big crew, and I would always like to eat with a crew and hang out with a crew a lot of the time, but I never really felt as though it was me, you know. Always liked, I'd be happier in a club.
This was the place that, when Mark came up after his Brothers in Arms tour, this is one of the places that he came and played with myself and Brendan.
The great thing about coming back to Leeds to play anywhere was that, I mean playing here was great, and I remember Prefab Sprout actually opened for us here. This was our first little pub tour.
You've done this album, and there's a lot to talk about you. At the time, there's a lot of, you were in the press a lot, so there was a lot to talk about you. And by the time you got here, you've been then living in Deptford. It was a returning hero, but you didn't actually know it, and it was backed out.
Playing in places like this has a lot to do with heat generation. You get old-fashioned lights on a low ceiling, and the sweat used to sting. When I used to sometimes toss my head, it would go in great sheets over the audience. And I remember once at the Marquee Club, they'd packed about 1,000 people in, and this kid handed me this note up at the front. There's people like that, you know, and this had me a note at the front, and it said, "More liquid gumption, please." And I didn't know what he was talking about, and it took me ages to work it out, because I'm a bit slow, you know. Yeah. And then I realised what it was, that he was getting covered in this stinging sweat. Now, actually, that's how the headband thing started, because I needed something I couldn't see me chords through my tears.
So this is Crossfield Estate in Deptford, in southeast London, and behind the flats where we lived is where we had our first gig with Squeeze, the Residents Association kind of a little gig here, and some other little bands. There were a few little bands around there that were trying to imitate the first of the punk bands, and I remember them being very, very small and really very sweet. They were must have been about 15 years old, 14, 15 years old. And they came and they tuned up in our room, then they went up out on stage and started, and it was always those old songs always started 1, 2, 3, 4. I remember 1, 2, 3, 4. And the first line of the first song, "My old man is a." Over there is the wall where Love Over Gold was written. Somebody had written Love Over Gold. That gave me the idea. I used to see it every morning. Well, somebody's put a plaque there now with it on, I see, because we donated something towards the artwork there that became part of that wall. I must say it's a big improvement on the way that it was. Someone's written, "Please return my dog," and it's still there, so that dog hasn't obviously been returned in 20 years. I really enjoyed my time here at Deptford. I just remember it with affection, really. Charlie Gillett had a programme on London radio called Honky Tonk, and that was actually the outlet that we got for the demos in the first place. We had a little demo of Sultans of Swing, and John had paid for it with the last of his savings. He had 250 quid that cost to make them, and Charlie started playing the demos on his radio program. I thought it'd be a good idea to send them to Charlie, and thankfully he did, and that's how everything started. We used to rehearse just here at the Wood Wharf Studios, which I'm amazed to discover are still here. These were always our favourite, or my favourite anyway, rehearsal rooms. It hasn't changed a bit. I think that's the seat that Mustard used to sit. We're in the room where we used to do an awful lot of rehearsing, and of course it's full of stuff now because it's more of a studio. When we were here, there was nothing here at all. It's amazing to me that all the rehearsal rooms, nearly all the ones I've ever been in, have all smelled the same, and they have the same sort of damp, sort of underfelty kind of sacking smell. This one's also got bits of the river, bits of the Deptford River as well. I used to like to dream out of the window while I was playing and standing around. Rehearsing is quite hard work, really, and yet I think it's good if you've got something visual. A lot of studios and rehearsal rooms have no windows at all, but having this just seemed to help. Different songs come for different reasons, obviously, and I'm very happy to report that there's no formula as far as songs are concerned. They come for all sorts of reasons, and they have to be dealt with on their own terms, like people, you know, they are what they are, and you just try and do the best thing by each song as it arrives, as it presents itself to you. Sometimes find myself with at the top of a song with a wide shot, and Silvertown Blues is a bit like that, and it starts like that and then goes in to a character. It's just if you go there, you feel that. You see the big sky and the sight and the place.
Leave the story untold, Silvertown. And I'm going down in Silvertown. Down in Silvertown. I'm going down in Silvertown.
I always associate that with the Squeeze guys, and so I wanted them on it. It's just a flavour thing that you mightn't even necessarily recognise, but to me it's something that ties up there. Chris told me something interesting on the session. He said that, you know, his dad had been brought up in that whole area, and now nothing of his life remains there, nothing at all, not a scrap, trace or shred. I actually started writing that song before the dome was built, and I've often thought since, when I was working on the song, oh well, I should just throw it away now. It's redundant, and then I thought, well, you know, based on that story that Chris told me, I think just for the people that lived there, I'll just keep it going. You start off thinking that you're learning the guitar, then you start to have the nerve to think that you're a guitarist, which I still have trouble with. And then when you start writing songs, you start to think of yourself as a songwriter. So it's your actual idea of yourself is what changes. So this guy found his way onto lots of records just because it was never sounded like a wooden thing, and it never sounded like an electric thing. It all sounded like its own thing. I don't play it very often now. Sitting around playing with this one day, tuning into an open chord, and then playing with it, finding other shapes. Because you've got to find other shapes to make chords with, and ended up with changing the key, playing around here with it. And if you put a capo on, you know, like a little clamp on it. You know, you can find different tunings, and when you're writing songs, it's quite nice to fool around with different keys and different tunings. And I found this one. It was just became a sort of introduction to Romeo and Juliet. The guitar is a wonderful instrument in the sense that it is so complete. So it was a love affair for me, and I was basically obsessed with it, and probably still am. And I love to look at my instruments and talk about them, and it's just a lot of pleasure. With a love song that he made. People ask how you got such and such a sound, and I usually can't remember. I just can't always remember what amp I used or whatever. I just sort of twiddle around until I get the right kind of sound. I was reading the liner notes of an album for a little gospel group called the Fairfield Four, who were a four-piece black gospel group from Nashville and is still going. The guy who wrote the liner notes had said something about touring in the Deep South and how often it might have had to have been a bologna sandwich instead of a steak in a restaurant. So I just took that and went with it. You don't strut around in these country towns, you best stay in the car. Look on ahead, don't tear around, you best stay where you are. You're a long way from home, boy, don't push your luck too far. Bologna again. Maserati 300S and the Fender Stratocaster. Both got to be red, really. I saw cars like this racing and in pictures and in books when I was little. You know, when I first saw Stirling Moss driving when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And I had this little observer book of cars. I've still got that book, you know. From playing with little ones, you know, little dinky toys and things like that, to just playing with real ones. You know, it's the bit of you that refuses to grow up, really, I suppose. For me, it's just relaxation. You know, I just find it really enjoyable. I've just got to focus completely on this, and you really can't think about anything else. Sailing to Philadelphia, I was reading this massive doorstep of a book. I mean, a book's as big as a transistor radio. It's Thomas Pynchon, of Mason and Dixon. Fantastic thing. It goes all over the place, and you know, you realise when you're reading it that what it's doing is you're looking at America now through an early part in its development, and these two English guys that went over there to do this job and to draw this line. The song is a sort of 3-minute, you know, so it's sort of massively compressed, just my take on it, on the story really, but also I was flying in and out of America an awful lot at the time, and I was changing at Philadelphia. You'd sail in on a jet, you know, and you'd see these big tankers and stuff, you know, you're just pushing in, you come to this enormous airport, and now you realise that all it is, it's a place where they change planes. Sailing to Philadelphia, a world away from the coldly tide. Sailing to Philadelphia to draw the line. The Mason Dixon line. And I love the whole cycle. I love writing songs. I really love rehearsing them. I love recording them. I love working them through with the band and going out and playing. I really feel as though I'm getting myself in a position where I'm actually starting. And I know that might sound strange to you, but it's true. It really is true. I feel as though I've got my best stuff to come, and I'm really enjoying writing now and life now, probably more than ever.